Hey, what's up, everyone? Ralph here. So we all know that when taking on debt, we know that's a significant financial decision. So it's essential to ask yourself some critical questions that's going to ensure that you make an informed decision that aligns with both your financial goals and your capabilities. That's why in this video, I want to share with you some questions that you should ask yourself before you decide to take on any debt. Because like being someone that, back in the days where I had, my financial issues with debt, these are questions I probably would have liked to ask myself. And going back, I probably would ask myself, but you understand how we all understand, like when in a moment, like when it comes to taking on debt, we kind of rationalize the decision that we make. It makes sense in our heads, and we're like, all right, I'll just take on this debt, and then eventually I'll pay it back, or I'll figure out how to, make it work. So, and eventually that leads us into trouble. So I think it's important, especially like, if you're someone that's struggling financially, like when if you're in that position where you feel like debt is the only option that you can take, it's important to first ask yourself questions that's going to help ensure that you're making a more informed choice. So let's start with the first one, right? The first question you should be asking yourself is, does it make money, right? Now, I got this from like books when I've read financial books, especially like Rich Dad Poor Dad, when he talks about debt. Like the first thing you should be asking yourself is like, does the debt make money? Because if it's not making you money, then there really is no point of taking on that debt most of the time. So outside of your primary residence, right? If you're looking to buy a home, then obviously that's something you should do. But we can make the argument if that's the first thing you should be buying is like a single family home. Like if I could go back, I would recommend that people, instead of buying if you're going to make a purchase of property, your first purchase should be like a multi-family, right? Think about the income. I know everybody wants that dream house, but you should be thinking about like maybe get a 2-unit, a three family, and then find ways to create income out of that primary residence, and eventually down the line, find your dream home. But yes, like when you're taking on debt, make sure to ask yourself, does it make you any money? Like for credit cards, right? I understand that people like to use credit cards. Like me, I use credit cards, but I know that I can pay back every month because I don't want to pay interest on that credit card, and I could get points, and I use that obviously to get points. You get flight miles, you get all different type of benefits associated with that. But I make sure to pay that at the end of it. I pay the balance every month, so I'm not paying that interest fee. But people tend to use credit cards, and it's costing them money because they don't pay off that balance, and they're paying like a 20% APR interest on that. But you want to make sure it makes you money. Also, if you're going to use debt to use a business. Now, I wouldn't recommend it if you're starting the business because you want to make sure you can prove that the business makes money first. But to each his own. But like I said, that if you're going to take on any debt, make sure it's going to make you money. Right? Getting debt to buy a car. I understand like cars are now expensive, so it's hard to really buy that cash. But for me, I paid my car cash, $10,000, and boom, I don't have any payments on that car. I don't lease the cars, I don't finance the cars, not anymore, because it's just it's a depreciating asset. But if you can avoid it, if you're going to take on a debt, first ask the question, does it make you money? And if it doesn't, then does it really make sense, right? So the next question you want to ask yourself is, how does this debt affect my financial goals? Because remember, like the debt you take on today is money that you won't be able to use in the future. All right, you need to really understand that, because if you're going to take on this debt, then obviously there's going to be a cost associated with that, and that's money you won't be able to use in the future. So you need to really understand and ask yourself the question, how can this affect my financial goals in the future? Whether maybe you're trying to retire at a certain time, or maybe you're, like I said, you're trying to purchase a home in the future. Like you need to really think about, all right, what are my financial goals, and how does this debt, taking on this debt, affect my goals? Because like I said, using this money, you won't be able to use this. Like maybe you want to invest as well. Maybe you want to eventually invest, but you have this debt that you have to think about. So you want to focus and make sure you understand and recognize that, all right, if I take on this debt, how will this affect me investing forward? Or how will this affect me and me saving up to purchase a home? Or how will this affect me in like my retirement goals? So these are things that you need to really understand and ask yourself these questions. Because like, for example, we see a lot, especially when it comes to students, right? When we all want to go to college, like if we don't have the cash, obviously we don't have the funds to pay the cash up front, we got to take on a loan, right? But a lot of students that we get so excited, like, oh, we're going to school, we're not really thinking about the debt. It's like, oh, we got some way to pay, some way to pay the debt. All right, I'll think about it after I graduate. But then you see how people, when they graduate, they talk about how it affects them from, maybe wanting to get married in the future, or affects how they can purchase a home in the future because they have to pay off this debt. So these are things that you need to really think about before you take on a debt, and ask yourself these questions, like how can it affect my goals in the future? Because these are things that it may not impact you right now in the moment, but in the future when you start thinking about, all right, these are things I want to do to help improve my life financially, having this debt could be a huge burden. Now the next question is then you need to ask yourself is, can you afford the debt, right? And in this question, there's going to be a bunch of questions within this question, because there's a lot of things associated with this, like when it comes to affording your debt, like what is the total cost of the debt? What are the payments? What are the interest rates? Are there any fees? These are questions that you should be asking, because obviously, like I said, you need to understand that this is something you can afford. Right? You need to be like, all right, how much will this cost me every month? Like, can I afford this every month? Can I make payments? Because like I said, students have this issue as well. They're like, all right, let me take on this debt now. Then when I graduate, I get a job. Then I can make the payments on these debts, right? But then usually what happens is you graduate and then you don't find a job, or you get a job, but it doesn't pay enough, and then you're struggling. You can't keep up with the payments, and that affects everything else you do. So you really need to figure out, all right, like, can I afford this debt? Like if you're going to college, like the degree I'm getting, what will it net me after I graduate? Will it be easy for me to find? What will be the difficulty of me finding a job? You need to ask these questions, like how much is it per month? What is the interest rate? See, these are questions you need to ask yourself, because once you're taking that debt now, it may seem like it makes sense right at the moment, but then years down the line, it's like, all right, why am I struggling to make these payments? Because you're adding more expenses and you haven't really planned it out. So you want to make sure you understand the terms, like the interest rate, how much it's going to cost, and really understand that, all right, going down the line, will I be able to hold up, keep up with these debts going forward? And finally, the last question you want to ask yourself is, do you really need this debt, right? Because I know in a moment when we're all, in a situation where, like, all right, man, there's no other way. Like, all right, I need to use this credit card. I need to take on this loan. I need to do whatever I need to do to make sure I have some money, because I'm really struggling for cash. But you really need to ask yourself, like, what are the alternatives? Like, are there any other way? Do I really need to use this credit card, even though I don't have the cash to make sure I pay it off every month? Because like I said, we tend to rationalize things in our head. Like, if we really need money, we'll find a way to say, all right, I'll take on this loan now, and then I'll make sure I'll pay it at the end, or I'll pay it at another time. I've done that myself. I was like, all right, I'll make sure, I have a job, so I'll make sure I'll make the payments on this, and then I'll be done with it within a year. And eventually I got into, collections, and then it took me years to pay it off, and it put me in a bad situation. So we always tend to rationalize it. We need to understand that, like, all right, are there alternatives? Can we borrow money from our friends and family, or could we get a job and make payments that way instead of taking on this debt? So we need to find out, are there other ways? Are there alternatives to having to take on this debt and having to make, whether it's a school loan, whether it's a car loan? Are there other ways that we can do this, or instead of using that credit card? There's always different ways, and I know it may at the time may seem like there's no other way, but you really have to sit down and think about it, because even though that things may be dire and things may be tough, there's different ways that you can manage and find ways to come up with the cash that you need. So these are questions that, at the very least, like before you take on a debt, you should be asking yourself the question, because it's easy to take on a debt. It's easy to use that credit card, because boom, that's just money that's available to us. But even though it's not ours, we got to pay back. We know that it's there and we can use it, and like I said, we'll justify paying it back later in the future. So these are just these questions that at least you want to ask going forward, and make sure that this is the right decision for your financial future. All right, so that's all I got for you guys today. Like, remember, like, final note, like, taking on debt is a huge decision, right? Like, it's a big decision, and it's something that we all need to consider, because if you're someone that's looking to build wealth, one of the worst ways to kill your wealth building opportunities is by having debt, right? Because having debt is such a burden for a lot of people. It's like instead of building wealth for yourself, you have to then take that money that you have and then help pay somebody else, pay off the debt that you have to someone else, and that's the slowest way to build wealth, right? I know this from experience by having debt. Like, it stopped me from doing a lot of things, but once I figured it out financially, like once the light bulb went off, I understood that, if you're looking to build wealth, you have to find income generating assets. You have to reduce the amount of debt, and unless the debt makes you money, it's usually no reason to have that debt. And I always think of it that way. Like, if I'm gonna take on some debt, that thing has to find a way to generate me some type of income, more money than the interest rate that I'm taking on that debt. So I always think of it that way, right? And because you see people taking debt on their phones, right? It's like $1,000 phone, they'll take a debt on that, or purchases that they use their credit card. These are just the worst ways to build wealth. If you're looking to build wealth, then you should shouldn't be. These are the wrong ways to do it. You got to figure out. You got to always think of it as in terms of like, how can I create more income for myself? And by having debt, unless it's making you money, there's usually no reason to have it. So that's all I got for you guys today. If you got any comments or questions, make sure to leave it down below. Hit the like button and share. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe. All right, so you guys take care and have a good one. Later.